you all are having an amazing, marvelous, and magnificent day or night. My name is TV, and if you're a true crime lover like me, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Before we get into today's video, I just want to shout out my first comment winner, Be Carried Away. Thank you so much for being the first comment winner, and any of you guys want to be the first comment winner, just comment down below being the first one to comment, and you can be featured in one of my future uploads. So, as you can see by the title, today's video is going to be cases that keep me up at night, or cases that have kept me up at night. I'm going to be talking about 4 different cases, and 2 of those cases does involve the harming of children. So just be aware of that. I don't go into detail of what happened to the children. I will talk about it on a surface level only. So I just wanted to warn you guys about that. And also throughout the video, I will butcher some names. So if I do that, I do sincerely apologize. I butchered the names and also like the locations of different places like around the world. So just ignore that and forgive me. So before we jump into today's video, I do have a sponsor. So let's hear a short little message from today's sponsor. And Luisa jewelry is crafted with the planet in mind. And Luisa jewelry is carbon neutral and climate neutral certified, offsetting 100% of their carbon footprint. So you'll know exactly where your jewelry is coming from. All of their products come with a 2-year warranty. Their jewelry are always tested for allergies, damage, breakage, and tarnishing. Speaking of tarnishing, I have some jewelry items from them that I've had for over a year now. I've worn these pieces plenty of times and they haven't tarnished or broke. So Anna Luisa does a very, very swell job at testing these pieces. Their pieces will also elevate your look. We all love to look good without breaking the bank. Their pieces are affordable, starting at just $39, and they'll be even more affordable if you guys use my discount code TATIVAL20 and save 20%. Thank you, Anna Luisa, for sponsoring today's video. Warning, this video may contain details of graphic content. This channel is for mature audiences only. Some viewers might find this disturbing. One August day in 2012, 35-year-old Mitchelle Blair came to her apartment in Detroit, Michigan to find 8-year-old son inappropriately touching a Barbie doll. She asked her son, quote, "Why are you doing that? Did anyone ever do this to you?" End quote. Mitchell's 8-year-old son stated that his brother did this to him. 9-year-old Stephen Barry. Mitchell then ran upstairs to confront Stephen. She physically assaulted him and placed a garbage bag on his head until he was unconscious. Mitchell continued torturing her son for 2 weeks until he unfortunately passed from his injuries on August 30th, 2012. 9 months after the murder of 9-year-old Stephen Barry, Mitchelle stated she found out that her 13-year-old daughter, Stony Blair, was also inappropriately touching the same little boy. Stony was tortured until she died in May of 2013. 9-year-old Stephen Barry and 13-year-old Stony Blair were never seen again for 2.5 years. And I know what you're probably exact same thing. Did they have anyone looking for them? Well, the children's father were not in their lives, and Mitchelle took them out of school and notified the schools that they were going to be homeschooled. When her neighbors around the neighborhood were concerned about the children, she always had an excuse. On March 24th, 2015, Mitchelle Blair received an eviction notice. While she was not at home, a group of people from the 36th District Court went inside of Mitchell's home to remove her items, furniture, clothes, etc. They found a white deep freezer that was located in the living room. They discovered Mitchell's daughter's Stoney wrapped in a large plastic bag. Underneath Stoney was her brother Stephen. Mitchell was found at a neighbor's house with her other two children. She was arrested for murder. It took 3 days for the two bodies to unthaw. You guys, these poor babies were in the freezer for the past 2.5 years. Mitchelle confessed to the murders and stated she had killed the, quote, demons, end quote. After finding out they were inappropriately touching on her youngest son, she explained in detail what she did to those babies. In June of 2015, Mitchell pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder. She told the judge, quote, "Yes, I killed her, and I would do it again," end quote. Mitchell is now serving a life sentence at the Huron Valley Correctional Facility. On October 21st, law enforcement from Davis County served an eviction notice at the River Chase Apartments to 56-year-old Laronda Jolly. They made an extremely disturbing discovery. Laronda's badly decayed body lying underneath a pile of clothes. Her 4 children were living in the apartment alongside of their mother, which included a 30-year-old woman, her 27-year-old sister, and their 27-year-old twin brothers. The children all had developmental disabilities. Laronda's brother, Anthony Jolly, stated that he had been trying to get in contact with his sister for months. Anthony attempted to visit his sister, but every time he would, his nieces and nephews would say that Laronda was asleep and he could not see her at the moment. Anthony even asked police to perform a welfare check, but police said she wasn't home. It is believed that Anthony had not seen his sister in over 2 years. It is believed that sometime in 2017, 56-year-old Laronda Jolly told her children that she was going to lie down and not to bother her, and they respected their mother's wishes. With them having developmental delays, they didn't realize something was wrong, and their mother never woke up. Laronda had a history of seizures, but signs of foul play were ruled out. Tsutomu Miyazaki was born on August 21st, 1962 in Tokyo. He was the eldest son of a well-known wealthy family. His family owned a regional newspaper company, and his grandparents served on the town council. He was born with a birth defect that caused his hand joints to be fused together, which ultimately prevented him from being able to bend his wrists upward. Throughout his childhood, his birth defect was a target for other kids to bully him. When Tsutomu got to high school, his grades began to drop dramatically. He had dreams of becoming an English teacher, but settled for going to a local junior college and studied to become a photography technician. In 1988, Tsutomu's grandfather died, which resulted in his depression and him furthering into isolation. He stated that his grandfather was the only one that supported him. In an attempt to gain something, he ate part of his grandfather's ashes. A few weeks after that, he was caught staring at his sister while she showered. His sister told him to leave, and he attacked her. When he was confronted about this incident by his mother, he attacked her as well. A 4-year-old girl named Mari Kona vanished from a friend's house on August 22nd, 1988. Her little body was dumped in the hills near Tsutomu's house. Her hands and feet were found in Tsutomu's house a year later. On October 3rd, 1988, a 7-year-old girl named Masami Yoshizawa. Tsutomu offered her a ride. He killed her at the same place as his first victim. He did some awful things to her body and took her clothes with him once he left the scene. At this point, it was unclear if Mari and Masami's cases were connected. It was 6 weeks since the murder of Mari, and investigators weren't sure. 2 months later, on December 12th, 1988, he abducted 4-year-old Erica Namba, who was on the way home from a friend's house. Tsutomu forced her into his car. He drove her to a parking lot and forced poor Erica to remove her clothes while he took pictures of her. After taking this poor baby's life, tied her up with a bed sheet, placed her body in the trunk of his car. He disposed of her body in a wooded area. 3 days later, her body was discovered. Erica's family received a postcard on December 20th, sent by Tsutomu. The message was in Japanese and the words were cut from magazines. When translated to English, it read, quote, Erica, cold, cough, throat, rest, death, end quote. On June 6, 1989, Tsutomu convinced 5-year-old Ayaku Namato to allow him to take pictures of her. He convinced Ayaku to follow him to his car where he abducted her. After killing her, he took her corpse back to his apartment where he stored it for the next 2 days. And for the next 2 days, he would perform some of the most unthinkable, disgusting, unimaginable things to this poor baby. When her body began to decay, he dismembered her. He put her head in the hills nearby, which stayed there for 2 weeks. He was afraid that the authorities would find her head, so he retrieved it from the cemetery and brought it back to his apartment. He kept her hands to participate in cannibalism. On July 23rd, 1989, Tsutomu spotted 2 sisters, an older sister and a younger one. He was able to separate the younger sister from the older one so he could take pictures of the younger sister. He was able to convince the younger sister to strip nude. He was caught by the girl's father, who attacked Tsutomu as he should. Tsutomu was able to escape the father's restraints and he fled on foot. Tsutomu returned back to the location to get his car, where police was awaiting to arrest him. Police searched his home, where they discovered 5,763 videotapes and photos of various things that I would not get into. On March 30th, 1990, his trial began. He blamed the killings on the, quote, rat man, end quote, who was his demon alter ego that coerced him into committing the killings. The judge ordered him that he was fit to stand trial, and he was sentenced to death. At 45 years old, Tsutomu Miyazaki was hanged on June 17th, 2008. Edmund Kemper III was born on December 18th, 1948 in Burbank, California. He was the middle child with an older sister and a younger sister. He had a rough upbringing. His parents separated in 1957 and got divorced in 1961. After his parents separated, Edmund lived primarily with his mother, Laronda Kemper, in Helena, Montana. They had a tumultuous relationship. His mother was an alcoholic who would frequently humiliate and abuse him. Edmund overheard his mother tell someone that Edmund was a, quote, real weirdo, end quote. She would refuse to show him affection out of fear that he may turn gay. She always told Edmund that he reminded her of his father, and no woman would ever love him. On occasions, she would make Edmund sleep in the locked basement because his mother feared that he would hurt his sisters. Edmund would later describe his mother as a, quote, angry, sick woman, end quote. At age 14, Edmund ran away from his mother's home with hopes in reconnecting with his father, who lived in Van Nuys, California. Edmund stayed there for a short time until his father sent him to live with his grandparents on a ranch in Sierra Nevada. He described his grandfather as senile and stated that his grandmother was, quote, constantly emasculating me and my grandfather, end quote. So just a side note, this is just something that I just thought of as I'm reading this to you guys. That's usually when serial killers start killing just women. Their hatred begins with their mother. In this case, it seemed like it began with his mother and kinda his grandmother as well. By age 15, he was 6 feet 4 inches. He started off by killing and torturing family pets and insects. At 13 years old, he got jealous of his younger sister and killed the family's cat, keeping some pieces of it in his closet until his mother found it. Some of his favorite games to play as a child were gas chamber and electric chair. During this game, Edmund would ask his younger sister to tie him up, flip an imaginary switch on. He would fall to the ground pretending that he was being electrocuted. Edmund encountered 2 near-death experiences. The first one, his eldest sister tried to push him in front of a train. And secondly, his eldest sister successfully pushed him into the deep end of a swimming pool, causing him to nearly drown. On August 27th, 1964, 15-year-old Edmund was sitting at the kitchen table with his 66-year-old grandmother, Maud Huey Kemper, when they got into a heated argument. Edmund left the kitchen to retrieve his weapon, and when he returned, he shot his grandmother once in the head and twice in her back. Allegedly, his grandmother's last words were, quote, "Oh, you'd better not be shooting the birds again," end quote. Edmund's 72-year-old grandfather returned home from grocery shopping. He fatally shot him in the driveway. Edmund did not know what to do next, so he called his mother and he waited for the police to arrive. After his arrest, Edmund stated that he, quote, "just wanted to see what it felt like to kill grandma," end quote. He would later testify that the only reason he killed his grandfather was because he didn't want him to know that his wife was deceased, and he would be angry at him for what he had done. Edmund's crimes were considered incomprehensible for a 15-year-old to commit. A court psychiatrist diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. He was sent to Atasatrio State Hospital, which is a maximum security facility that houses mentally ill convicts. During his time at the mental hospital, a California Youth Authority psychiatrist disagreed with Edmund's previous schizophrenia diagnosis. They stated that Edmund, quote, "showed no flight of ideas," which is an excessive speech at a rapid rate, no interference with thought, expression of delusions or hallucinations, and no evidence of bizarre thinking, end quote. They also stated that he was intelligent. His earliest IQ test results were over 136. When he was tested again, he measured at 145. The psychiatrist would describe him as, quote, "being a model prisoner," end quote. He was trained to administer psychiatric tests to other inmates, in which Edmund would later admit that he was learning a lot from the sex offender he would more than likely administer the test to. He was able to figure out how to finesse the test so he could manipulate his psychiatrist. The psychiatrist will later say, quote, "he was a very good worker, and this is not typical of a sociopath. He really took pride in his work," end quote. He became a member of the JCs, which is a group that focuses on business development, management skills, individual training, community service, and international connections. On December 18th, 1969, he was released on parole on his 21st birthday from the mental hospital. Against the hospital orders, he was released into his mother's care. Edmund told his psychiatrist that he was rehabilitated and his juvenile record was expunged on November 29th, 1972. The last report from his psychiatrist stated, quote, "if I were to see this patient without having any history of HILD or getting any history from him, I would think that we're dealing with a very well-adjusted young man who had initiative, intelligence, and who was free of any psychiatric illnesses. It is my opinion that he has made a very excellent response to the years of treatment and rehabilitation. I would see no psychiatric reason to consider him to be of any danger to himself or to any member of society. And since it may allow him more freedom as an adult to develop his potential, I would consider it reasonable to have a permanent expunction of his juvenile records," end quote. In the midst of him staying with his mom, he attended a community college that was in agreement with his parole requirements. One day he had hopes in becoming a police officer, but was rejected due to his size. During this time, he was 6'9", and his nickname was Big Ed. He went through many different jobs. The relationship with his mother continued being toxic, and eventually Edmund saved up enough money to move out with a friend of his in Alameda, California. Edmund's mother, Clarnell, would often call her son and would surprise visit him frequently. He would go through financial trouble that forced him to move back in with his mother. In March of 1973, Edmund got engaged to a young lady who he met at Santa Cruz Beach. The engagement lasted only a year. It was broken off due to Edmund getting arrested a second time. That same year, in 1973, Edmund was riding a motorcycle when he was struck by a car. His arm was badly injured, and he received a $15,000 settlement. In today's money, that would have been $91,000. With some of his settled money, he purchased a 1969 Ford Galaxy. While driving around, he noticed a lot of young women hitchhiking. He stored several items in his car that consisted of plastic bags, knives, blankets, and handcuffs. He began picking up women that were hitchhiking and peacefully letting them go. He later stated that he picked up around 150 women and he let them go because he wasn't feeling homicidal sexual urges, which he called, quote, little sapples, end quote. Anita Mary Luchessa was born on October 29, 1953. She attended Davis High School. While there, she was a part of various clubs, which included the freshman Yale Leaders, the sophomore Yale Leaders, the German Club, the Science Club, and the American Field Service. On May 7, 1972, Edmund was driving in Berkeley, California, when he came across two students from Fresno State University that were hitchhiking. 18-year-old Mary Ann Pesci and 18-year-old Anita Mary Luchessa. The students had every intention on catching a ride to Stanford University, but unfortunately, they would never make it. After driving around for an hour, Edmund found a secluded wooded area. He handcuffed Mary Ann and locked the other Mary in the trunk of his car. He stabbed and strangled Mary Ann to death and proceeded to do the same thing to the other Mary. He put both of their bodies in the trunk of his car and drove them to his apartment. On the way there, he was stopped by police for having a broken taillight. Edmund's roommates were not at home, so he took the bodies up to his apartment, where he photographed and inappropriately touched their corpse. Afterwards, he dismembered them, storing their body parts into plastic bags. He disposed of the bags near the Loma Prieta mountain. Their heads were disposed near a ravine, but before he did that, he engaged in eramatio in August of 1972. So, 3 months after the murder, Mary Ann's skull was found on Loma Prieta mountain. An extensive search around the mountain led to a dead end, and none of the rest of their remains have ever been found. Aiko was born on May 25th, 1957 in San Francisco, California. She was a well-known exotic Asian dancer and a brilliant student. She had desires of being involved in politics. On the evening of September 14th, 1972, repaid her by taping her mouth, suffocating her until she lost consciousness. He put her on the ground and began inappropriately touching her. Afterwards, he strangled her with his scarf and placed her body in the trunk of his car. He went to a nearby bar to have a few drinks. While walking back to his vehicle from the bar, he opened the trunk and stared at Aiko's body. Later on in his confession, he stated he was admiring what he had done. He drove back to the apartment and inappropriately touched Aiko's body, dismembered her just like he did his other 2 victims, and disposed of her remains. Very little of Aiko's remains were found. Aiko promised her mother that she would not hitchhike that evening. Aiko, who was Ed's 3rd victim. On January 7th, 1973, Ed was driving around the Cabrillo College campus. He picked up 18-year-old Cynthia Shaw. He took her to a secluded area where he executed her. He put her body in the trunk of his car. At this point, he no longer had the apartment, so he moved back in with his mother. He took her body back to his mother's house, where he stored her body in a closet overnight until his mother went to work the next morning. When his mother was gone, he inappropriately touched her body, removed the bullet, and decapitated her with a power saw in the bathtub. Disposed of everything but her head, throwing it off a cliff. He kept her head to again engage in erasmatio. Afterwards, he buried her head in his mother's garden, facing her bedroom. He buried her like this because he, quote, always wanted people to look up to her, end quote. Over the next few weeks, pieces of Cynthia were discovered. Everything except her head and right hand were found. Cynthia Ann Shaw was Ed's 4th victim. On February 5th, 1973, Ed got into a heated argument with his mother, so he left the house with the intention on finding his next target. He rode around the University of California, Santa Cruz, aka UCSC, and came across 23-year-old Rosaline Thorpe and 20-year-old Alice Helen. Now by this time, students were informed to not accept rides from cars that did not have a UCSC parking sticker on it. So ladies and gentlemen, what did Ed do? Well, at this time, his mother worked at UCSC. He stole her UCSC parking sticker off of her car and placed it on his. Yes, y'all heard me right. This is how sick and determined this man was. So when Ed approached these 2 women, they felt safe accepting a ride from him. Rosalind entered the car first, followed by Allison. They were shot at point-blank range and their bodies wrapped in blankets. He decapitated their heads in the vehicle and carried the headless bodies into his mother's house. That gave me chills. He proceeded to touch their bodies in an inappropriate way. He removed the bullets, dismembered them, and disposed of their parts the next morning. A week later, some remains were found at Eden Canyon, and other parts were found near Route 1. Rosaline was described as being a bright, well-liked girl. She was attending UCSC, studying linguistics and psychology. The day of the murder, she left her home after dinner to attend a lecture on campus. Her roommate Nancy thought she took the bus since it was raining that A class. Alice was a regular hitchhiker from the campus, so this was not unusual. When the two women disappeared, it spread like wildfire around the campus. It was unclear if the disappearances were linked together because the women did not know each other. Volunteers from the college began a search on February 14th, 1973, around the woods of the campus. On April 20th, 1973, Ed came home in the middle of the night from a party. He awakened his mother. While sitting on her bed, she said to Ed, quote, "I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now," end quote. He replied, quote, "No, good night," end quote. He waited for her to fall back asleep. He snuck back in her room and bludgeoned her with a claw hammer and slit her throat with a penknife. He decapitated her and engaged in erasmatio with her severed head. But it doesn't stop there. Ed put her severed head on the counter and threw darts at it. He screamed at her head for over an hour and smashed her face in. But wait, he's not done yet. He cut out her tongue and larynx, put it down the garbage disposal. The garbage disposal could not break down the vocal cords, so it ejected the tissue back into the sink. When Ed later confessed, he stated, quote, "That seemed appropriate as much as she bitched and screamed and yelled at me over so many years," end quote. Ed hid his mother's body in a closet and went to a nearby bar for drinks. The following day, Ed called his mother's best friend, 59-year-old Sally Hallett, telling her that he wanted to surprise his mother by taking his mother and Sally both to dinner that night. Soon after the phone call, Sally arrived at her friend's house. Ed laid several weapons around the apartment, but ended up using none of those weapons. Ed would later state in his confession, quote, "I came up behind her and crooked my arms around her neck like this. I squeezed and just lifted her off the floor. She just hung there, and for a moment I didn't realize she was dead. I had broken her neck and her head was wobbling around with the bones of her neck disconnected and the skin sack of her neck," end quote. After killing her, he proceeded to have intercourse with her body and put her in a closet. He left a note to police stating, quote, "Approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday. No need for her to suffer anymore at the hands of this horrible murderous butcher. It was quick the way I wanted it, not sloppy and incomplete. Gents, just a lack of time. I got things to do," end quote. He fled the scene in Sally's car and drove non-stop to Pueblo, Colorado. He drove over 1,000 miles with 3 weapons, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, because he believed he was the target of a manhunt. When Ed arrived in Pueblo, he drove himself to a phone booth and called the police. He confessed to the murders of both his mother and her friend Sarah. He waited for police to arrive. While in police custody, he also confessed to the murders of the 6 students. During his confession, he was asked why he turned himself in. He stated, quote, "The original purpose was gone. It wasn't serving any physical or real or emotional purpose. It was just pure waste of time. Emotionally, I couldn't handle it much longer. Toward the end there, I started feeling the folly of the whole damn thing. And at the point of near exhaustion, near collapse, I just said to hell with it and called it off." Confessed that he participated in cannibalism. He stated that he would cut the flesh from the victims' legs and cook them. He would later recant his statements, stating he was was not involved in cannibalism. On May 7th, 1973, Ed was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree murder. Due to Ed's clear-cut and straight-to-the-point confession, his only option was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. His trial began on October 23rd, 1973. During his trial, a court-authorized psychiatrist determined that Ed was legally sane. California used the M. Naughton standard, which means a person who commits a crime be unable to recognize that the crime is morally or legally wrong due to the mental disease or mental defect. They should be found not guilty by reason of insanity. On November 1st, Ed took the stand and stated that he killed the victims because he wanted them, quote, for myself, like possessions, end quote. He attempted to convince the jury that he was insane. He continued stating that 2 beings occupied his body, and when the killer personality took over, it was, quote, kind of like blacking out, end quote. On November 8th, 1973, it took 5 hours for a jury to deliberate. Ed was guilty on all counts. Ed requested the death penalty. A moratorium was placed on capital punishment by the Supreme Court of California. Instead, he received 7 years to life for each count. He was to serve his time concurrently and was sentenced to the California Medical Facility in Vacaville, California, where he still resides. Today, Ed is 74 years